share with us some lessons from how it's working there, talk about the success rate, the benefits of right to counsel, some challenges as well. We'll turn then to Quadeer Porter, Executive Director of Brothers Building a Better Nation, to talk about his own experiences here in New York and the community where he works, and the housing issues he's seeing and the need for attorneys. And end with my colleague Abdul, who's an assistant clinical professor here at the law school, works with our legal design lab and the Housing Justice and Legal Design Clinic, talking about some of the broader issues regarding right to counsel and situating it in the overall housing justice movement, and also talking about Jersey City. So I'm not going to speak too much. Refer to everyone's bios online. People will tell you a little bit about their backgrounds, but I'm going to turn it over to Dean first.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
All right, are we still awake? All right, we're going to remember that we're keeping you from lunch. So we'll try to make this interactive and feel free to jump in and ask questions so that we can have a dialogue. I'm really delighted to be here and quite honored. I'm looking out at the audience here and I see a lot of fellow advocates, fellow attorneys, and people who have been at this issue in New Jersey for a really long time, and this is an esteemed panel that I'm honored to be a part of, and I want to thank Lori and Ann and Sam and everybody who are part of this today, putting it together. First, the personal connection, right? We're looking at policy, we're talking about implementation, we're looking at data, but we have to remember that we're talking about people at risk of displacement. Right? These are real human experiences, and I come to this work, there's a very personal connection. I come to this work in a similar fashion that Professor Francese talked about, informed by my former housing instability, growing up poor in an immigrant household in the melting pot of 1970s Philadelphia. A whole bunch of different kinds of immigrants living in row houses right next to each other. We all hated each other and loved each other at the same time. And some of us were up here in the social class, and some of us were still trying to make our way up. And so I remember what it was like feeling unstable about our housing all the time. I remember what it was like to translate for my parents who were not native speakers, English wasn't their first language, before a judge, before a court officer that was there to serve us with our warrant. I remember what it was like as a baby lawyer, legal aid lawyer, when I became an attorney. I knew I had to be an advocate and work in this space. I remember what it was like on the other side, advocating for other low-income, at-risk residents who were in crowded hall rooms trying to save the day. About to go in front of a judge, one day, make it or break it, right? And being crowded by landlords' counsel and court staff, encouraging them, pressuring them to engage in a settlement, probably not one that they could truly promise, but they have to in order to save the roof over their head for just another week or two, if not just a little bit longer, right? So let's remember that. Let's center ourselves when we're talking about the data and the policy and right to counsel. Let's remember the space that we're operating in. So, when the state hired me right before the lockdown in mid-2019 it was actually late 2019, right before we went into lockdown in March 2020, they had no idea what they were doing. I came on board with a specific purpose and charge to develop a right to counsel assistance program that could be coupled with existing assistance programs that the state was providing. So let me tell you about DCA. DCA is the Department of Community Affairs. It is one of the largest state agencies in the state. And its job is to support every single community, all 564 municipalities. You wonder why your taxes are high, right? There's 564 fiefdoms. in New Jersey, a small, very densely populated place in our great country. So I was hired to build a right to counsel program or something like it to connect to existing housing assistance that DCA has been disseminating for decades, right? DCA, the Division of Housing, is one of the biggest divisions of housing in the country. We are the 7th largest housing provider, for instance, and we put out billions of dollars every year into housing assistance. But who is looking at how effective all of that assistance is, right? What are we doing about making sure that tenants know their rights, that they can advocate for themselves, that their decisions are informed? And after you've been, discriminated against and told that your time is not yet and you don't belong in this house or that housing unit, they don't take the voucher, you finally get a voucher. Yay, you finally made it through the lottery. What happens then? Who's going to ensure your long-term stability? And this is why we need, beyond the assistance programs, and there are many of those, beyond the rental assistance dollars, and there are lots of those, but we need a lot more, of course. We need the attorneys to be advocates, to level the playing field. In court, because the majority, 95% or more of tenants in New Jersey are pro se, in court and out of court. So our job is not just today, when we're discussing this throughout the day, it's not just to think about the court, it's also to think about where we are right now in this space. It's about systems change throughout the landscape of prevention and assistance. Because you heard earlier, when it was framed for us, that housing is healthcare, housing is economic opportunity, housing is a human right. Without housing, housing comes first, right? So we knew under the law that we could not guarantee every low-income tenant at risk of eviction an attorney. We could not guarantee a true right to counsel. This is where we need to go. So what could we do to expand access to counsel? We started a pilot in a couple of counties, in Essex County, in Mercer County, and in Atlantic and Cape May counties, where we expanded access to free, quality, brief legal advice and full legal representation where necessary and as appropriate to low-income tenants facing eviction. We had a few dollars to work with, about $5 million. It wasn't a lot of money, right? And we partnered with our awesome, and some of them are here today, nonprofit legal services providers in this great state of New Jersey, like Legal Services of New Jersey, like the Community Health Law Project, like Volunteer Lawyers for Justice, and all the regional offices of some of those organizations. And what we saw was pretty amazing. What we saw in New Jersey during that pilot program is what national data shows about increasing and bettering the housing outcomes for folks when they do have a legal advocate. When they have an advocate who can help them understand what's going on, who can speak for them, help them assert their rights in court when they do have defenses, when they have someone who can negotiate on their behalf with the landlord's counsel. Landlords are almost always represented by counsel, right? It really leveled the playing field. So when the attorney was involved, 76 to 80% of the time, we averted a lockout, okay? When an attorney was involved, the legal outcomes, by almost 88%, 85 to 88%, were better. They were dismissals and settlements pre-judgment. or we were able to stop a warrant of removal from being executed post-judgment. So that was really successful. We were like, yay, now what do we do? Right? We started talking, we started getting together different stakeholders. Then we realized, well, you know, the best defense against displacement is a wraparound, comprehensive defense. So yes, we need the attorneys, but wouldn't it be nice if the attorneys were also working with caseworkers, social services providers who had access to the rental assistance programs? And wouldn't it be great if it wasn't like what we have now, a landscape of providers, legal and social, who aren't always talking to each other because it's too much going on at the same time, and there's silos, and it creates a lot of barriers for the people at risk who need help. The people who are in crisis, they call 10 different numbers, they're asked 10 different times to fill out the same forms over and over again. That's not harm reduction. That's not justice. So wouldn't it be nice if we can find a way to connect them as partners? So as a low-income, at-risk tenant, you would get an attorney and a caseworker together who are coordinating, even at the early stage of their intake and screening. So I'm sitting here, and I've got my legal partner right here, and we are cross-referencing the same case, the same referral, so that we can get that person legal access, and we can also get that person money to pay back rent that's owed for non-payment of rent cases, and we can get that household the other social services and long-term stability support that they need, because we know that when people are facing housing instability, they're also facing a lot of other things that are happening in the household. So that's what we created. Now available statewide, there is a wraparound, comprehensive network of legal and non-legal providers working together to prevent evictions. We call it the Comprehensive Eviction Defense and Diversion Network, CEDD. It's a terrible acronym. If you have a better one, please see me afterwards. And so it's putting together this idea of guaranteeing access to legal services, which are critical, and with support of a caseworker who has access and can screen someone immediately and quickly while working with the attorney for all of the rental assistance programs that are currently available and for which the household at risk would be eligible. We recognize, though, systems change. Remember what we said at the beginning? Systems change. Okay, Dean, so you're saying that you're taking this thing over here that's okay, and this thing over here that's also okay, and you're putting it together. Where is the opportunity for systems change? Well, we recognize that the caseworkers needed to also have access to their own flexible, low barrier dollars to help at-risk households with emergencies, to help at-risk households with putting up a Marini bond, if they had affirmative defense to assert, right? And to help households who are not otherwise eligible currently in all of the legacy programs that have so many restrictions, right? I remember this story distinctly. I took this call myself of a woman who was crying. She had her 2 under 5 kids in tow. They were on the curb, literally. And she found a socket to charge her phone so that she can speak to me. And she said, I got locked out. Help me. I don't agree with what was owed. I have proof of payments, and I have nowhere to go, and I just spent my last $500 to have my stuff taken somewhere in storage. help me. So, the traditional approach is call 211, because that person is now effectively displaced. They're homeless. Call 211. 211 is going to say, where are you? Which county? I'm in Essex. Then 211 is going to go down the list of all the providers in Essex, and they're going to connect that lady. And that's what they did for her, right? They connected her to like 5 different organizations, and those organizations, I saw these emails myself, sent her emails that asked her to fill out 26 pages of paperwork while this lady was sitting on the curb at like 4:15 in the afternoon. That's not prevention. That's not justice. That's not removing barriers. So what if we had one organization that was the front door to all the other organizations? One resource navigator in every county who would be the front-facing resource navigation for all of the organizations. And that resource navigator would also have access to funds that are unrestricted and low barrier, so that we can get this woman in a hotel for at least a couple of weeks, immediately solve her displacement before, as we work toward her long-term relocation and housing stability. So, what we're looking to do is prevent lockouts. What we're looking to do is level the playing field in court. What we're looking to do is provide long-term housing stability resources by quickly screening people, legal and non-legal, working together to get them access to rental assistance dollars and other supports that they need very quickly, because the judges are waiting, and the judges don't want their cases to backlog. The judges don't want any one of us here, no matter how great we are in terms of lawyers, to stand up and say we need an adjournment for like 2 months. It ain't gonna happen. We're not gonna get it. So we need to solve these problems immediately and quickly. And we need to make sure that people's legal rights and civil rights are protected. Through the pandemic, we did get some judicial reforms. Some of them didn't last long, right, Quadeer? I know you got something to say about that, and I hope you will, and when it's your turn. But we also got some effective legislation that came out of that. But where's the enforcement, right? And how do we make sure that we can prevent people from getting illegally locked out because they're self-evicting, they get that notice, they don't know better, that they only can get evicted legally locked out by a court officer after a court hearing called a trial, an eviction trial, and so on and so forth. So, we are now operating across the state. We have about 50 resource navigators, and they're connected to just about every nonprofit legal services organization that we have in New Jersey. We're currently only working with nonprofit legal services organizations because the procurement process at the state is difficult to engage in private contractual relationships with other attorneys. But we are looking at how we could bring in the pro bono bar and how we could maybe create a referral system to perhaps retired attorneys who would like to give a little bit of their time towards this, because one of the challenges is we don't have enough attorneys, right? And we're seeing tremendous success. 76% of the time when the two parties are working together, they're able to avert a lockout. And when we look at the populations that we're serving, they truly represent the populations that have been disproportionately affected by eviction and displacement in New Jersey. We're talking about our Black and brown households with children. 73% of the persons that we serve are single parent Black females, right? Isn't that immoral, right? We're seeing a significant uptick, about 20% in households that report some disabling condition, either physical or developmental. In all of these households with children, what is it doing to those kids, many of whom are children under 5, right? The displacement is not just housing, it's disrupting their entire life, where they go to school, their friends, their network. It's destroying and disrupting entire neighborhoods. So I think what we've done by expanding access to counsel and ensuring social services support and working together, we are laying the groundwork for a guaranteed right to counsel. And we do have some data to show that after all of that is said and done, we spend an average of $2,300 per household when we do this. That's still cheaper than having people displaced. And I'll leave you with this, and I know my time is up. I'll leave you with this. There's so much to say on this issue. I'll leave you with this. We have now put out reports, because we have data to back it up, showing a direct link between eviction and homelessness. In New Jersey right now, eviction is the second leading cause of homelessness. Second leading cause of homelessness. And while folks out there are legislators and some of our other partners we have to work with to get systems changed and to get to a better place, while they understand homelessness, they can see houseless folks, they get it, they can wrap their heads around it, eviction is not visible. People don't see that. And there's a lot of bias against people experiencing poverty who cannot make ends meet every month. And so it's our responsibility to truly make that more visible and to show that there is a direct link and to engage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate it. I apologize for cutting off, but we have a fantastic panel with some others here.
Yes.
So ask Quadeer to talk to us a bit about your experience with Newark and where you are now, too, briefly.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Quadeer Myers. I'm an attorney, supervising attorney right now with the Hudson Valley Justice Center in the city of Yonkers in the county of Westchester. Prior to that, I was the coordinator / director of the first municipal right to counsel office here in the state of New Jersey, called the City of Newark's Office of Tenant Legal Services. Before I became the coordinator of that office, I co-wrote the legislation in 2018 that brought the office about. So I was its first director. I was the director of that office until April of this year. So this, eviction defense is huge, and if it's your passion, we could be here for days talking about eviction defense. I'm happy to see some students. I believe that, at least I was told that some members of the audience are students. Thank you, I see you nodding your head. And I'm impressed to see that, and I appreciate you all, and also let me thank Seton Hall, as well as the organizers of this conference for inviting me to this incredible, important event. So to the law students, it's not about money, and if you approach it as a social justice issue, which is what eviction defense is, I think that will sustain you throughout your careers. For me and for many of us, and I believe all of us that are on this panel, it's a mission. And so I'm not sure exactly where to start. I know that we're talking about different models. The City of Newark's model was to contract with outside entities, sole practitioners, private firms, as well as nonprofit organizations to handle eviction cases that Newark tenants were facing. we tried that for a while, for like, I don't know, 2 years. And then we determined that that was not the most effective model. Because there's a loyalty aspect, there's a retention aspect, and there's also a timeliness aspect. Summary evictions, or eviction actions are summary. They're incredibly fast-paced, they're unforgiving, and they require immediate action. And if your model is to refer your cases to outside counsel, you're most likely going to be waiting for them to respond at least a day or two, or maybe even longer, about whether or not they're going to take the case. In the meantime, your client, the constituent who's seeking help from you, is facing a lockout the next day. And so my experience is that the better model is to have direct hires, in-house attorneys handling those cases, because there's a guarantee that that attorney will be dedicated to those right to counsel cases holistically. I like the fact that Dean talked about the comprehensiveness of eviction defense, because it is comprehensive. It's not just about giving a tenant your rental assistance, and that will solve the problem. Many of our constituents are facing mental health issues that are tied and connected to the threat of eviction, and that cannot be understated. What also cannot be understated are the race-class dynamics that exist in the evictions landscape throughout the country. And when we're approaching this as attorneys, as eviction defense attorneys, we cannot ignore the reality of race and class and its impacts on our relationships with our clients. We cannot ignore that reality, right? And when we're going into this, we cannot assume that our clients are going to automatically trust us. And I think that that is something that we need to pay more attention to, because it impacts whether or not our constituents will actually seek legal help from us, right? If we have a feeling, if we're a constituent that's facing the threat of eviction, and we believe that if we reach out to the, to an attorney, and they're going to be looking down upon us, and making judgments because of the position that we're in, we're less likely going to seek help. And so there's a cultural immersion sort of requirement that I think right to counsel attorneys need to take into consideration. Because the reality is, as Dean just said, the majority of tenants in this country that are facing eviction are Black women, right? And people of low income. And we also have a large immigrant community, undocumented, whose primary language is not English, that is also largely facing the threat of eviction. And so cultural immersion is so important to building that trust between yourself and the client, because a client is less likely to be candid. And candor is so important when building a defense. It's so important to understanding holistically the facts of your client's case. So I'm going to say this to the law students, because you're first starting out. Don't be afraid to get into the community. Engage with the population that you intend to provide assistance with. Community outreach. Try to learn the language. If I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I do speak some. And I think that and they've said it to me, they appreciate the attempt that I make to communicate with them, right? And I force myself to speak in Spanish to my Spanish-speaking, primary language of being Spanish clients in Spanish, right? That is, at Hudson Valley Justice Center, that's it's primarily our clients are Spanish-speaking because of the community that our office is located in. And we don't discriminate. You know, our criteria are similar to the criteria of Office of Tenant Legal Services here in Newark. Immigration status has no effect on your eligibility. And so, you know, if we want to retain a very effective rights to counsel office, we need to take those phenomena into consideration. Race and class are real, and they have a huge impact. What are some other things? The need for attorneys cannot be understated as well. There is an incessant need. So if you're going to have a rights to counsel office, make sure that it's staffed with an adequate amount of attorneys. The more attorneys that you have, the less your attorneys are going to be subject to burnout because their caseloads are going to be manageable. Do not overwork your attorneys because they're going to leave. They're going to get burned out. They're going to get frustrated. It's not going to be a mission for them any longer. It's going to feel like a job. And I can tell you personally, if something starts to feel like a job, it's time for me to go because what I do is a mission. And that's why I'm at the point in my life, come next year, have been practicing law for 20 years. And I'm at the point where I can safely take a job because it's something that I believe in. It's in line with my worldview. And I think that, if we're going to retain attorneys, that's something that we need to be aware of, especially those that are dedicated to the work. Let's not overwhelm them. Let's give them a manageable caseload. Let's give them a decent salary, because especially the good ones, we can go anywhere we want to. So, for us, we don't want to stop. We don't want to have our attorneys stop what they're doing because they're not getting paid enough because they can't keep the lights on at their homes. They can't feed their children and things of that sort. So it's so important. If you're coming, if you're coming from a government perspective, understand that you're not always going to be popular. Your rights counsel program is not always going to be popular in certain circles. You have developers, you have landlords, right? And you have to approach what you're trying to do with that understanding. That it's not always going to be politically helpful or attractive in certain arena, but that's okay. That's okay because there's enough people who do appreciate rights to counsel and see the importance of it. This is such an important topic. I could keep going. I'll open the floor. I know that we're short on time, so I'll open the floor to any questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It is a challenge. We can have a charter session with any one of these applicants, but now I'm going to turn over to Sarah, who's been given us 8 to 10 minutes to summarize what happened in New York City with rights to counsel. So that's a huge task. But if you give some highlights from your New York City experience, that'd be great.
Traditionally short, by the way, just to let you know.
I like that.
Really speak. Sarah Wagner, Teamsters Local 237, Legal Services Plan for Respondent Tenant. I must have said that like 1,000 times in my life. This is my world. And as Dean said, I've been informed by my own housing instability, and even though I don't look it, I've been in this spot, and this is why we do what we do. My day job is running a legal services benefit for union members. It's a general civil law practice, so anytime a union member has a personal legal problem, they come to us and we represent them in most of the courts in New York City. So we're our own civil Gideon, if you will. So I've been informed, I've done that for half my life. That's my entire career has been spent doing legal services in all different ways for all different working poor people in my community. My specialty, because of my background, is housing court, where I supervise and practice housing law in 11 counties just across the river. I also co-chair the Civil Rights Council Task Force of the New York City Bar Association. which examines ways to improve and better implement the right to counsel in New York City. So I'm in the trenches every day and thinking of ways to fix those trenches at night with some of the best brains out there. And as my colleagues have already said, eviction is a violent, systemically racist process that reflects the power dynamic between owners and renters. Housing court is structured to expedite eviction, not to prevent it. It affects poor people, women, and the black and brown populations in vastly disproportionate numbers. The eviction system puts profit over human need. Who does that? So, housing court has been an instrument of displacement, gentrification, and homelessness that facilitates the loss of affordable housing. And the problem is caused by a severe imbalance of power. Landlords, almost all landlords have lawyers, and almost all tenants do not, right? So, giving tenants a right to a lawyer on their side levels that playing field. It gives people a good chance to stay in their homes, and right to counsel restores dignity and justice to housing court. A lot of us have been in the hallways of housing court. It's disgusting. Who wants that? And people are forced with, gee, if I don't make this agreement, I'm gonna lose my home. And the power dynamic doesn't work. So in 2017, New York City enacted the nation's first statute providing a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction. The city took a huge step forward toward a true system of equal justice for all. The statute basically had and formulated its own agency called the Office of Civil Justice to administer the program by creating contracts with legal services providers. There's about 20 legal services providers. So we don't outsource at all, right? We've got Legal Aid Society and Legal Services New York City and the Bronx Defender's Office and various other legal services providers who do all the work and are trained pretty much similarly in the law, so that we don't have what we call ATB. We don't have a person out there that doesn't know what they're doing taking a case for a tenant. We have a lot of lawyers being trained together in their own basic organizations, so there's some continuity of service out there. And the way it works in practice is the tenant on their first day of court gets assigned a lawyer after they're screened for eligibility. And the court case is adjourned, which means put it off for another day. And they have a chance to talk and decide how they're gonna go forward. Are they gonna make an agreement? Are they going to file a motion to dismiss? Are they gonna put in an amended answer? And by the way, just because you guys just addressed it, in New York City, the rent deposit law, although there is one, doesn't come into effect until I think it's 60 days after the case has been going on. And if the tenant or the tenant attorney has asserted a defense that the rent is wrong, the rent amount is wrong, they're charging the wrong amount, they're asking for the subsidy amount, or that the person has been constructively evicted or partially constructive eviction, then that is no longer the case. And I would say by and large, we don't use that rent deposit law anymore. Nobody even asks for it anymore because there's so many. The rent is always wrong, people. There is not one time where a tenant is being charged the appropriate amount of rent in housing court. Never. So, one of the reasons why you need a lawyer is because the rent is wrong. You need that equalization of power. So, over the course of the past year, the City Bar Task Force on Civil Right to Counsel met with stakeholders involved in the implementation of the right to counsel to examine what has been working and the challenges that remain to a full and successful implementation of the right to counsel. And so here's what we found. New York City's groundbreaking legislation sparked a national movement. Thank goodness, that's why we're here in New Jersey today. And has become a standard bearer. 4 states and 17 localities have adopted right to counsel statutes, and there are campaigns to expand the right to counsel underway in scores of other jurisdictions, including here, cross your fingers, including a campaign for a statewide right to counsel in New York. And prior to the adoption of the right to counsel law, there were an estimated 100 or fewer attorneys representing low-income tenants in New York. Now there are an estimated 700 or more attorneys providing eviction defense in New York City. So that's huge. New York City's data shows that 84% of tenants who receive representation have been able to stay in their homes. 84%. Since adoption of the law, eviction filings have been reduced by more than half. More than half. That's huge also. And as have the numbers of the evictions that have been executed. With the help of their attorneys, tens of thousands of New York City's most vulnerable residents have been able to remain in their homes and communities, avert life-altering eviction and displacement and its traumatic consequences, including disruption in children's education, obstacles to employment and access to health care and homelessness. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. There are lots of moving pieces to the right to counsel. And it's hard to change the system that's been entrenched for 50 years for the right to counsel to reach its full potential. The Human Resources Administration, which is our Department of Social Services, they provide monetary aid, loans and subsidies to tenants, and they also house the Office of Civil Justice, who administers, again, that right to counsel program and negotiates the contracts with the legal services providers, the Office of Court Administration, and the housing court judges who preside over the cases, the legal services providers who represent the tenants and recruit, supervise, and train tenant attorneys, tenants who sometimes don't know their rights at all, and landlords attorneys all have to be on board with this to make it work. Right now, there are lots of different plates spinning in the air, kind of separately, instead of a partnership, which is what we need. The promise of New York City's Right to Counsel program has yet to be fulfilled. More than half of the tenants entitled to representation under the statute are unable to obtain counsel. Legal services providers have had difficulty recruiting and retaining attorneys for the work, which is hard and fun, but really hard. Judges express frustration with the pace of implementation and the uncertainties surrounding who will be able to obtain representation and when, and none of the stakeholders are satisfied with the city's systems for implementation of the right to counsel and for provision of rental assistance and other supports. Provision of rental assistance is so hard. Why can't I get my one-shot deal? Why is there a 30-day expiration date to my getting my one-shot deal, and then I have to reapply all over again? Why? Why can't we make it easier to get the rent so that the lawyers don't have to work so hard and that the timing is always pressed against? It's really hard. So this is just the beginning. The music is being written, which will ideally be a concerto with all parts of the orchestra playing together. Tenants deserve nothing less than the highest quality legal assistance to help them defend their homes when they're faced with eviction. And legal services providers deserve the financial support, come on guys, right? That they need to provide the assistance and offices that can attract and sustain a committed, diverse, and skilled workforce. This is a great job, people. You can go to trial your second week into legal practice. You work for a big law, you don't see an inside of a courtroom for 7 years. I'm telling you, this is a great job. And there's loan forgiveness. So, and the courts deserve to be able to adjudicate housing disputes in an environment that fosters dignity and respect for all parties and allows for the full examination of the rights of all parties. No 2 minutes of justice anymore. New York City and other cities like this one must take the necessary steps to provide the financial support and effective systems to assure a well-run and effective right to counsel program. New York City has inspired the right to counsel movement throughout the United States, and if we can get it right, we can be a national model for the right to counsel program excellence. So, the more progress New Jersey makes toward a right to counsel, and the more we compare notes, the better off tenants will be nationwide. She did it, right? Somebody in New York. Wait, what time?
down to Quadeer Porter from Brothers Building a Better Nation to help keep us grounded. We're going to talk about the community experience and what he's seeing in his community here in Newark, and the housing issues that are going on there, and highlighting a couple of key issues related to housing and the role of attorneys that might be able to help. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lori. Can anybody hear me? It is humbling to be here, to say the least. My name is Quadeer Porter. I'm the founder and executive director of a Newark-based nonprofit called Brothers Building a Better Nation. I founded this organization 4 years ago, and I founded it because one of my mentees, he just got released from prison. I met him when I first bought my house. They never seen, at that time I was about 29, 30 years old, a brother my age to buy a house. And so they said that, watch out, the lady that owns the Airbnb always calls the police on us. And I was just like, oh, well, don't worry about calling the police because I'm the one that owns it. So they kept on coming over my house and just asking for more and more information about how to own a home. And so I was working with them and started to mentor some of them. And one of them unfortunately passed away due to gun violence on his way to my house to go get his driver's license. And that's when I invoked the state ID, because he's the one that just got released from prison. And it was at that point where I felt like there's just something that has to change. It was something that Ms. Myers said that was so amazing, about just the burning passion that you get when you're doing the work. Because when that happened, it was literally, I saw his picture on it. He messaged me and texted me, and then on Instagram, literally 15 minutes later, it said RIP. And so, I went out to the community. I tried to find, where do brothers go to heal? Where do we go to finally kind of reset and repair ourselves? We know the systemic racism that happens in the medical practice. My bachelor's in public health and my first master's in health administration. So a lot of times, brothers just do not trust hospitals or therapists. They weren't allowed in the libraries. We got called, the police called us in the libraries before. Most of them, I'm about to say 85 to 80% of the guys that come into my program have been kicked out when they were about 16 years old, 15 years old. A lot of times, once the young man goes to puberty and they stop being really cuddly, they become more of a risk. So a lot of times you find these brothers on the basketball courts, at the corner stores, and so there was no place, a safe place for them to heal at. So I started the organization just as a support group. Just finally something that we built. We didn't have to wait for a council person or Congress person or another entity. Just us coming together to try to figure some of these things out. And so it started with 4, and then it boosted to 30 and 35. And I was like, all right, we're going way too fast. But the thing that we saw was that the brothers started to, like 30 and 40-year-olds bringing the 20-year-olds. And the 20-year-olds was bringing the 16 and 14-year-olds who was used at the park. And it was touch for me because when I grew up, my family was heavily impacted by the crack epidemics. My mom was kicked out when she was 14. I was kicked out when I was 16. We lived on Kent Street and South 10th Street. So we literally lived right next to the graveyard. So I went to St. Benedict's Prep, and thank God they had a dorm because it was either me literally living inside the graveyard because there was nowhere else for me to go. I didn't know any other place to go. Where do you go when you're 16 years old? The bus terminal, the park, school. So a lot of the places that they've gone through, I was able to automatically pick up and see that what the problem was. One of the key things that happens when a young man goes homeless is that when he goes down and looks for help, a lot of times they don't know ways to get money without somebody that's older to try to get them. So they walk to a lot of these places, social services, and they throw them a piece of paper, and they say fill out the 26-page paper. And the front desk person gets frustrated because sometimes they're timed. And so, a lot of times they don't understand that young brother is dyslexic, or and now they kick them out, and now that brother probably walked 5, 6, 7, 10 miles down there. And that was his last time asking for help. And then you start to see them start to spiral. So a lot of times they don't even get past the ability to even get general assistance. Even one of the most shocking ones that when I went down to one of the agencies that assist with getting general assistance, a some of the work said like, well, he looks like my ex, so I'm not gonna process the application. And it seems strange, but you wonder why every time, a lot of times these young men go down there, they can never get past either filling out an application, they get denied general assistance, gets cut off. You get general assistance, you get TRA, but it's for 6 months. So a lot of landlords, because I'm also a landlord as well, I had a tenant not pay rent for 14 months. 14 months, over $40,000 with legal fees and miss rent. A lot of landlords don't want to take TRA. A lot of these young men, once again, never had a space to stay. So now you're going to try to rent to a person that's never had a place to stay before, that doesn't have a credit score. Once again, when they're kicked out when you're 16, 15, you don't know, a lot of the families don't know what a credit score is. So you start to see this cycle happen over and over again, constantly. And then that's when I saw that there's something that needs to change. So I started reading. I enrolled in Rutgers for in school social work. Didn't think I was going to get in. My mom wanted to become a social worker. I said, let's apply together. Why not? And then they accepted me, and I said, oh my God. So now I'm taking classes. I'm getting my second master's. And I used to work at healthcare too. That was my passion. My dream was to become a project manager, buy a house, and just relax and just finally kind of like, retired. It's been a hard life. 2 house fires, homeless when 16. But then it's like when I saw the first young man I was helping, skin go from gray back to brown, that was something that spoke to me that, wait a minute, this is something I'm actually doing that's really making a change. And I saw that a lot of times when it comes to doing this work, what's causing a lot of pain is miscommunication or no communication. The amount of times that I've tried to partner with a lot of the government agencies and said like, hey, let's just talk, because there's one case that I have where a young man was denied general assistance because they enrolled back into school. And they said, well, brother is in college. Well, I said like, well, no, he's in college, he's a New Jersey resident. And they said, well, did you read the manual, the 427-page manual? And I did read the 427-page manual. And in chapter 10, section 2, subsection 2B, it says specifically that as long as you're not a individual going from outside of the state, coming inside of the state, looking for housing, that's when you deny general assistance. So then he said he mysteriously lost his student aid package and I had to be submitted, and they get reprocessed. But these young men, a lot of times, lose hope because they see that there's nobody out there either listening to them. Before they can even complete a sentence, that same young man got denied general assistance this time. The first time when he got kicked out with his family, he was having this argument with the aunt's boyfriend, and he nearly got arrested. It was very violent. He was on the phone with the person for 2 minutes, and they said denied it was a family issue. You got to go back and just fix it. But once again, he doesn't know how to operate as well. But now he's getting his first apartment, thank God. So that was a great story. Now we looked at what the veterans were doing with the BSAT program, and I modeled it, and I pretty much created the nonprofit to be a guarantor for the other 6 months for the person at TRA. And the landlord was grateful for it. The brother has to make sure he stays up with counseling. I'm only counselor right now, so we're trying to scale up. We just got a contract with the Partnership for Children of Essex, which has helped out a lot. But we're trying to create our own solutions to lead our healing, because we know that especially when I started to do this work, and I went to a lot of these city council meetings, these government council meetings, a lot of the residents were so tired and so upset and so frustrated, and they couldn't articulate what the problem was. And so a lot of times it went on deaf ears. So I said that, and this is a book called Revolutionary Suicide by Hugh P. Newton that spoke to me and says that, when you want to make a change, you understand you got to sacrifice something. And for myself, it was my job. So I quit my job and started doing this full time. But it was that feeling that, it's not that I want to, of course, be homeless myself, but I can't continue to live in the conditions that we're currently at and call it life. So I had to give up something. And Q.P. Newton wrote it, you know, as a poet. He said, you're going to give us up physically, spiritually, economically, to make the change that you want to see. And so, you know, we came very, very far in the last 4 years as an organization. And I think that's the biggest thing, and the beauty of it is that there's a lot of pain happening, but there's healing happening at the same time. And the residents are trying their best to heal and engage with different parties to do it. And I think that's the special thing about it, is that we can create community solutions with the right support. But it's just us getting there is what the hardest part that it's at. So that's what I specialize in, is finding community-led solutions to a lot of these complex problems so that community can feel like they own the healing.